everybody, welcome back. My name is Annie Elise, and this is 10 to Life, where we talk true crime. Everything true crime. Cases, conspiracies a little bit, red flags, new information. We kind of just talk about everything, and I get, nice and comfy here on my pink couch, which I realize I'm wearing pink today. I'm like pinked out today, but I get here on my comfy couch and kind of just talk with you like, we're friends hanging out, having a chat. Casual, talk true crime, and just hang out together. So if you end up checking out this channel today and it's your very first time here and you appreciate the case coverage and the vibe that we got going here, make sure to subscribe to the channel so that you can check out other videos as they get posted. And for everybody who's already part of the 10 to Life fam, welcome back. So happy to have you guys here with me today. I know you've been following along with the case that we're going to talk about today, so you already are caught up. I don't need to explain that to you. But if you haven't heard about this case, I will link the playlist in the description, and I would suggest going there to check it out first. But the case we are talking about today is Debbie Collier. Now, we're going to go through updates in this case, and it's kind of been radio silent, except a few new things have started to emerge over the last couple of days. So we're going to go through all of that. This case is a very interesting one because this happened back in early September, and Debbie, who is from Georgia, is a woman who one day went running errands to a Family Dollar store, sent a very cryptic message via Venmo to her daughter that led everybody to believe that she may have been abducted because this Venmo memo said, they will not let me go. A key is under the blue flower pot, and it also included a very obscure amount in this Venmo transfer, which is, money transferring app. Since then, it's kind of been a roller coaster. And so we know that she was found, unfortunately, the following day, deceased. She was partially nude. It is believed that her shirt had been burned off. There was reminiscence of a gas can. There was a fire that took place. At first, it was ruled as potentially, at first not ruled, I should say. At first, they were looking at it as to potential accidental or potential self-inflicted, but then law enforcement quickly came out and said, no, this is a homicide investigation, and we believe whoever is involved is close to Debbie, it is targeted, it is personal, and that, of course, then made everybody kind of wonder, who could it be? Of course, looking at the daughter who received the Venmo amount, because unfortunately she has a little bit of a checkered past. And it's just kind of been a roller coaster from the beginning. And I wish that I could say it still is not a roller coaster, but it is. So some new details have come to light. New interviews have surfaced. There's a new interview that has not surfaced, which if you're in the group, you know what I'm talking about, but we'll talk more about that in a minute. And I actually talked to the sheriff's office myself yesterday. And not because I was calling because I'm inquisitive or trying to harass them. I'll explain why I spoke with them. But we're going to go through all those updates. So again, you're probably familiar with the case, but if you're not, check out the playlist so that you can get caught up. And let's get right into it.
10 to Life with Annie Elise starts right now.
So I want to start by discussing the most recent interview that Amanda did on her cousin's podcast. There are a lot of people talking about this interview. Many people believe that she was genuine, that she was, of course, distraught and heartbroken in this interview. And then the other half of people are saying, there's a lot of discrepancies, inconsistencies. She's a liar. There's a lot of division out there right now. So let's start with this interview because to me, she did appear very genuine, heartbroken, grief-stricken. I don't believe she was faking the tears. She may very well have. I could be wrong. I'm just telling you, my initial take on it. It seemed very genuine to me. If you watched one of the first videos on this channel too, I had mentioned when we played her 911 call that also felt very genuine and that she felt very scared or sounded very scared and very, worried and just consumed by emotion. And I received that feeling from her again in this interview. Now, whether that is entirely authentic or not, only she knows, but that's how I received it. We'll talk a bit about the interview and some of the inconsistencies that a lot of you guys have been calling out, especially in the group, and kind of talk through a lot of things along the way. In addition to the Amanda interview, I myself, along with Crime with Megs, who works with me on the 10 to Life channel and has her own TikTok and YouTube channel, and she's amazing, we interviewed Jeffrey, Debbie's son, a couple of weeks ago. This interview was via video. He had agreed to it, and it was about 2 hours long. So as you can imagine, it was jam-packed with information. A lot of information that I had never heard before, a lot of information that made me question certain things, and overall, a really, I think, beneficial and good interview for him to put out there in the public if he was trying to get this information known. At this time, he hadn't done any interviews with Court TV or any other news outlets, but that night after we finished recording the interview, that's when that all began, all of his interviews with everybody else. So initially, anytime I interview somebody, I like to give them the option to rewatch the footage, see if there's anything that maybe they said that they feel like they shouldn't have, that they said in the heat of the moment, or if there's anything they want to retract, just because, especially, and that's more like when it's a family member, just because I want to be respectful in that way. So I sent him the raw footage, and he came back with a few edits that I understood why. I can't get into the details on that, but I understood why he wanted to take it out, just because there has been some, turmoil in his family. And then sent him the updated file, and we were ready to go live with it. He then reached out with several more edit requests that felt like it was almost like a third of the video and a lot of the important details, to be quite honest, that he wanted removed. And at that point, I kind of just said, I was like, we can't do an interview or release an interview that is so piecemealed, only because the way the viewer will receive it is, why is this all spliced? Why is it chopped together? Why is there information missing? What aren't you telling us? And it starts to look like you're trying to strategically paint a certain narrative. And that's not good, obviously. You want to be as forthcoming and as transparent and honest as you can, whether you are a YouTuber, an interviewee, a family member, whatever it is. And when the message comes across as though you have cherry-picked the information you want the public to know, it gets a little dicey. So I gave him that feedback and we pulled the interview. He said he didn't want any of it released. So unfortunately, that interview is not getting released unless he changes his mind. But we're going to talk about a couple of things within that interview that did come up and that we did talk about without again, airing the stuff he doesn't want me to air. But there are certain things that I do want to mention that I think are important and that he said could be kept in the final footage. So anyways, we're going to talk about that interview too, because that's obviously two very important interviews from two very key people close to Debbie in her life, her two children. So going back to Amanda's interview, there were a couple of things that stood out to me that were either different from her first version of events or first account of events, or that were different from other individuals' version of events. In any event, regardless where the inconsistencies originated, there were some inconsistencies, and a lot of you guys have noticed it as well, so I just want to talk through those a little bit. Let's start with the number one that everybody is calling out, making TikToks about, and that everybody seems to be up in arms over. And it's the conflicting story about when Amanda last saw her mother, and her mother's state of mind, the date she last saw her, and the overall encounter. In this new interview, she says that she did not see Debbie on Friday, yet several times in the past, via news footage with an interview, comments from Amanda's boyfriend, tons of information out there, they did confirm that they saw Debbie on Friday, that Debbie brought them sandwiches and for lunch, that there was a haircut that took place that evening. In one of Amanda's interviews, she said that she and her mother had dinner and were running errands and then went their separate ways. So definitely different from not seeing her on Friday.
But no one saw her that day prior on Friday.
She was a beautiful, kind, giving woman, and she didn't deserve any of this.
Amanda says the last time she saw her mom was Friday night. They ate dinner, ran some errands, and went home separately. She had this message for her mother's killer.
I just want them to rot in hell. I do, sir. I mean, it's not going to take my pain away. I know it's not. But I want justice for my mom.
In Amanda's interview with one of the news anchors when this first happened, she said that they were running those errands, they had dinner, and then they went their separate ways, and that everything seemed fine, and that Debbie seemed happy. Yet now in this new interview that just was released, she changes that story quite a bit. She said that when her mom left her house, which we had heard they were at dinner and ran errands and then left separately, but she says that when her mom left her house, she had tears in her eyes and looked really sad, and that she didn't know why. which is a very different story than what has been painted in the past. And that's what has a lot of people talking, especially because, and I have to find the news source, but right after Debbie was found and all the reports came out of Amanda being at the scene, it was stated that Amanda was, of course, very, emotional when she was at the scene. Anybody would be, but that she said, my mother would never do this herself. She's never had these tendencies. She's never had a history of mental illness, saying that there's no way that would even be a possibility.
No doubt about that, Jennifer. Start with a random Venmo text to her daughter where she transferred $2,300 to her Venmo account with this cryptic message that said, they won't let me go. Also, in the missing persons report, her daughter said her mom has never ran away, wasn't. She was in fact the front office manager for an Athens real estate company, had no reason to leave.
But now in this interview, it has shifted to where she had tears in her eyes, where she was giving things away, where she was really unhappy and secretive, just a complete 180 from where it was before.
There were actions. My mom was like giving away things that, now looking back on, I'm like, well, that was weird. She had made some comment. It just almost seemed like she was giving me all of her things. There was some comments that she had made. She had taken that whole week off, the week of this happening off from work. And it's Friday. I said, Mama, it's getting Friday. You're going to go back to work on Monday. And she says to me, yeah, I can't wait. And I was like, Mama, what kind of sense does that make? Like, who looks forward to going back to work? And she said nothing. And it was just the saddest. Even when I seen her Friday, because we hadn't seen each other in a minute, I saw tears in her eyes. I'd never seen her that sad. I kept asking her, Mama, are you okay? Are you okay? And it's funny, when she had left the house, she wouldn't even tell me goodbye.
And I hate to bring this up and beat a dead horse with this, but we also know that the neighbor had called out that there was a commotion and an argument that evening, Friday night, before Debbie went missing on Saturday and did the Family Dollar store and all of that. If they were together and there was a haircut and they were running errands or had dinner at the house or whatever, who was that argument between? Because this neighbor had also said that anytime a young woman would visit in the past, there was often arguing and commotion. So that still doesn't have an explanation as to what happened that evening. And the exact whereabouts of everybody and timeline and versions of events still are a little askew.
People have asked if we would ask you what you and your mom were talking about when you were on the phone with her in that parking lot.
I wasn't on the phone with my mother. I'm not sure why she was there for the amount of time that she was. Excuse me. But no, I didn't speak on the phone with my mother at all on Saturday. We had exchanged some texts prior that day. But I didn't speak to her on the phone at all that day.
All right, so what we can confirm as far as that question right there is that we know that Amanda talked on the phone with her mother on Saturday afternoon. I'll have to look back at my notes from the actual report itself to be able to give you some kind of actual time for it. But the last time she spoke to her mom was on the phone.
In the interview as well, Amanda brings up the money that apparently Andrew, her boyfriend, owes for treatment centers or court fees and all of that, and how on this channel we, brought it up and said it all matches and that must be the motive. And
any idea what, it's such a weird amount. Any idea, between the message and the amount, right, everything else, I think it's a big part of why there's so much, people on one side versus the other side. It just, this Venmo, it's very Crazy.
One of my favorites was Annie. Oh my goodness gracious, you look like a pterodactyl, sweetheart. But wanting to say it aligns with my birthday. It's what Andrew owed at a rehab facility. Okay, well, first of all, the charge was related to marijuana. You don't go to a rehab facility for marijuana, not in my mind. And Andrew was never sentenced to go to a rehabilitation center. So y'all cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs made that up.
I can understand a lot of people have talked about this case, so maybe there was confusion. But for those of you who did watch that live, and I'm going to link that portion of it here, we definitely said the opposite. So I want to just make that clear in case anybody else heard that information wrong. We said that other people were saying that that amount was confirmed and that that was a motive, and that we didn't believe it, and we actually negated that that amount would make sense. So I'll link that here just so you can see that too, but I wanted to correct that piece of information in case anybody else also misheard it. And then we'll get into some more stuff because I saw this comment here. The daughter's boyfriend's court fees. The balance is $23.85. Let me pull something up here. Maybe, guys, I'm not a court clerk. I can't tell you that I know one way or another, but based on what I saw last night, it doesn't look like that is necessarily the case. So let me start here. So this person had reached out to one of the girls in my Discord, and she had said that she stumbled across her TikTok page saying, I've attached a screenshot from the clerk's office. Under Andrew's case, it states his fees totaled to $787.50. The fees that were calculated on Grizzly are the base fines that the state of Georgia can reference when sentencing defendants. The prosecutor and judge have discretion on each defendant's fines, but since Andrew was only convicted of reckless driving, his fees were much lower. And so she wanted to pass this along. And then she goes into further detail and throws the math all out there, saying the DUI, the possession, the seatbelt were all dropped. So he was charged with and convicted of reckless driving and then tag light requirement. And so he was sentenced on January 6th. So then here she breaks down the fees where it totals to $787.50 and then plus the $540, which is the supervisor fee for probation for the full year. It totals to $1,327.50, not the $2,385. Yeah. And then she goes on to say, according to the clerk's office records, his probation violation was for not attending ASAM classes and missing the screenings in July and August. So it doesn't look like that it all matched up to what they were saying. And then he says that he has 20 days to show proof, which we all know. He served 6 days in custody already, and then it shows the breakdown and all of that. So that to me, and I'm not saying that I am right or wrong in this, but that to me looks more compelling and substantial than looking at what Georgia charges for everything and trying to total it out to make it make sense and trying to force it and funnel it into the amount they're looking for. As I mentioned earlier, in that first 911 call that we had heard from Amanda, I had mentioned that she sounded very distraught, very grief-stricken, very worried, trying to figure out what had happened to her mom, that I didn't feel as though that emotion could be faked. I could be wrong, certainly, but I remember we talked about it on here. I was like, I don't know, it feels genuine to me. I felt that as well in this interview. However, I also did identify a lot of things that made me question things and give me pause. And I did say on this channel, and I will say it again, if Amanda was involved, I don't believe that she was directly involved. And I said that, I think, in my very first video as well. I think that if she was involved, it's perhaps from a different party that she's close to, perhaps something maybe in her past, something like that, to where she's looped into this. Because in that interview with the news anchor, she also said, my mom didn't deserve this and was crying, so perhaps there was retaliation, but it was because of Amanda. But I had said that based on her emotion and just my gut feeling when I saw her first interview, now especially this interview, I don't think that she was directly involved. Could she have been indirectly involved? Sure, and I think a lot of people still do assume that's the case, and it very well may be. And I also mentioned, and I apologize that I'm being a little repetitive here, that I didn't believe her to be directly involved because of the state that Debbie was found. That anytime somebody is partially nude or burned or something of that nature, very rarely is a woman involved, no less a family member. Generally, those tactics and those methods are males or somebody who has a direct hatred or, again, retaliation, but that very rarely do we see that from a woman, but also from a child or a family member. So that I didn't think she was directly involved, not only for her emotion, but because of the manner in which Debbie's body was found. And I stand by that, and I could certainly be wrong, but TBD, and we're going to talk more about that. So let's talk about the possibility that this was self-inflicted. Even though many people don't believe that to be true and law enforcement had come out pushing this homicide narrative and that it was close and personal and targeted, there is still that possibility. And Amanda, Debbie's daughter, is saying that she believes that is the case and that's what happened. I want to talk through that and play devil's advocate here for a minute, because I started to think about that footage in which after she left the dollar store and she sits in her car for a long period of time before sending that Venmo message to her daughter. All of us were wondering, why was she just sitting stationary in the parking lot for several minutes? What was she doing with somebody in the car with her? If this was an overdose situation and she was consuming pills of some sort, I think it's fair to think that it's a possibility that when she was sitting in the car, that's when she was consuming it, that it was in that pause. She consumes everything, slowly is taking them. We don't know how many she took. We don't have the tox report yet, and we don't even know that she did take any, and then sends the Venmo message and then drives to her destination where she planned to complete the act, so to speak. So then I started thinking about the fire, because a lot of people are saying that maybe it was a accidental fire, that something spontaneously combusted and that's what happened. So I started thinking, okay, well, if she did consume those pills in the car, then drove to the destination thinking, okay, well, by the time they hit me, I'll arrive, I'll light a fire to keep warm, and there was an accident because perhaps maybe she already was so impaired at the time she arrived. Maybe that is the reason that an accidental fire occurred. Who knows? But then I started thinking, if she had this master plan and this was self-inflicted, there still was no note left behind. And even if her version of a note was the Venmo message and the outgoing text that we have now heard that she sent Jeffrey, but that it didn't go through because the number was blocked or, whatever the details are with that, if those were her versions of leaving a note behind, why didn't she leave a note or a text to her husband, Steve? And if she was going through all these lengths to carry this out, why was there no note left behind? And then I started thinking about more things that point to this not being self-inflicted, which we've talked about before, and I know a lot of you guys think this too, but if this appeared in any way to be self-inflicted, why were there so many search warrants executed on Amanda and Andrew's place of living, on the house, if they believed that this is something that wasn't nefarious? That's a point. If this was self-inflicted, why was Debbie's phone smashed? Some people have suggested that perhaps she was staging an abduction and staging a murder so that a life insurance payout would happen, and that's why the phone was smashed. That's why there was the burning and the fire and all of these things. But in that interview, according to Amanda, Debbie didn't have life insurance. So why would you stage something if there's not going to be a benefit paid out? It just doesn't make sense. Not to mention that the manner of death, and again, maybe it was an accidental fire, but we're going to talk more about that because an arsonist spoke out about that. But it just doesn't make sense that with no note, the cryptic Venmo message, the smashed phone, the no message to her husband, which according to Jeffrey, they had a very happy marriage and Steve is a fantastic guy. So I don't think that she would have left him off the list of people to say goodbye to. And let's talk about that fire again one more time. Because even if, let's just say, again, I'm trying to play devil's advocate here and see all sides of it. Let's say that she was trying to light the fire to keep warm because she was going to ingest all of these pills. She was going to wait for everything to happen and she was going to go into this wooded area. It was going to be raining that day. She wanted to bring the poncho to stay warm. She was going to light a fire to stay warm until it happened. And then an accident happened and, whatever. If she were worried about staying warm that day, knowing what her plans were going to be, first of all, the weather disproves that. Because the weather, although there were scattered showers, had a low of 73 degrees and a high of 81 degrees. Hardly weather that would require you to light a fire to keep warm. Again, if she felt like it was cold or the rain and she wanted to buy the poncho and she was going to light this fire to keep warm, And that was her plan all along. Why would she wear shorts? Why would she wear a t-shirt? Why would she not have a jacket? Why light a fire to keep warm but not dress accordingly? And what I mean by that is, why go to the lengths of planning that you're going to get the supplies to light a fire to keep warm if you're not dressing to keep warm as well? It doesn't add up. It makes absolutely no sense. Also, in the recent interview with Amanda, she says that law enforcement has confirmed, I believe, that it was self-inflicted to her, but that they haven't announced it because I think she was alluding to her brother holding the investigation up or certain things like that.
You've come out and said that you believe it was correct.
Yes.
Okay, and kind of if you don't mind, like what is leading you to that conclusion?
I'm not. There are key intimate things that were shared with me that I don't feel, I'm not in a place in authority to say things and then, be accused that I'm lying or, my opinion just doesn't really matter, I felt like at this point.
Given the press, publicity, and everything else we know, even though the autopsy and the tox report are back, if law enforcement is suggesting to Amanda that this was self-inflicted, why would they suggest that to her and not make a formal announcement or not put to bed? They certainly know all of the rumors happening in the media and everybody pointing at Amanda and Andrew. Why not say, we're looking at this a different way or we're waiting on results? Why only address it to Amanda? Could it be that they're not announcing it as this because they're still waiting on more evidence? Perhaps to make an arrest, talks and the autopsy. Because also remember, the last time police spoke out in the press conference, they said, homicide, we're not going to change our mind. It's targeted and personal.
We believe that this act was deliberate and personal. Okay?
I saw you read.
So to go from that all the way to this, and if they are confirming that it is self-inflicted to Amanda, why have they not said anything else? Why have they been radio silent? And I just want to say, if it does end up being proven to be something that was self-inflicted, not only everybody on the internet, including myself, will have to take responsibility for, thinking all of these other scenarios, but law enforcement so boldly pushed that narrative, saying targeted, personal, homicide, not changing our mind. Like, they are the ones that brought that to life and put breath into that. So it will be really interesting to see what they say when all of this, the answers come out. Now, about that arsonist that I had mentioned earlier, there was a news article where an arsonist spoke out and said that an accelerant was used and that they found gasoline on Debbie's body and also part of a burned gas can at the crime scene. Now, if there was gasoline on her clothing, that does not seem like an accidental fire to me. You don't just take a gas can and pour gasoline on yourself. That feels much more like somebody did that to you. If you were wanting to keep warm, you were lighting a fire because of the rain, whatever, you'd be pouring the gasoline onto the ground. You wouldn't be pouring it on yourself. Gasoline on her person feels more in line to me like destroying evidence or trying to inflict pain of some sort. And again, the weather just also doesn't match up here. There was a low of 73 degrees and a high of 81 that day. Hardly fire starting weather. Now let's change gears for a second and talk about that interview with Jeff. There were a couple things that stood out to me about this interview. Again, it was 2 hours long and there was a lot of information. Now, one of the main things, which he has also spoken about on other interviews he's done, is that he doesn't believe that it was his mother in the dollar store. There's been speculation of that from the get-go. There was a worker from the store who said that she did confirm seeing Debbie. I can understand where maybe you are in such denial that this is really the reality of what's going on, that you would say that's not her, it can't be her. But I also think in the same breath you can say, it's her son. He knows her best. He knows what she looks like, you would assume. So if he's saying that he doesn't believe it's her, maybe it is something to consider. I personally do believe it was her in the store, but he firmly believes that he does not, or is at least very unsure about that. He's not convinced that it was her. He also mentioned that Debbie documented everything with her finances, that she kept every receipt, that she had files, I believe he had even said, like file folders full of receipts at the home when they went to her home, that she saved all of those things. So he said this person who was in the store didn't save the receipt or didn't take the receipt. That's very unlike her, which could be explained away easily enough. But he said that she was very, cognizant of saving receipts. He also said that she had been going through some financial trouble and that they learned this after her death and that she was overdrafted in her accounts. Now, my question with that, first and foremost, would be, okay, what explains that? I mean, everybody goes through financial troubles, especially right now in the world. But if she were overdrafted, what money was she sending in that Venmo to Amanda? What account was that from? Was it the last amount of money she had and she wanted to give it to Amanda? But he was very confused by that when he was speaking to us, being like, I don't understand. She was overdrafted. There was financial trouble. And that kind of just made me start to ask a few questions as well. Now, without getting into too much detail about this next part, he did explain why Amanda moved to Maryland and why Amanda moved back. And what I will say is that what he told me, whether it's true or not, what he told me and what he told us, I should say, Megs and I, does not match what Amanda had said. And Amanda's reasoning for why she moved, her experience there, and why she moved home. They have two very different reasons and accounts of that entire thing. We talked quite a bit about Andrew as well, and without going into a ton of those details, one thing that did stick out is that he said very firmly that he believes Amanda would protect Andrew, regardless of the circumstances. So that's interesting to hear as well, because I know a lot of us have been talking about the possibility of maybe Andrew being involved, or like stories just not matching up. And we know that he's been lighting up comments everywhere on YouTube. So he mentioned that as well. And as we all know, he's been very vocal about his displeasement with how law enforcement is handling this, particularly the sheriff's office and that individual. And he said law enforcement has not told him yet that it was self-inflicted. So I just go back to, if they're telling Amanda that, and they're confirming that or leading her to believe that that is the case, if Jeff is calling and inquiring, why wouldn't they repeat that same information to this family member as well? Why only to one of them? Could it be because they, again, are maybe waiting on more evidence, waiting on reports, or because they're not announcing anything officially because they're waiting for certain people to slip up? There is that expression that the loudest people usually have the most to hide. I'm not saying Amanda's the loudest, because she actually has been very quiet throughout this whole ordeal. I actually think Jeffrey has been louder than Amanda, although I don't think he's involved. But they say that loudest people are usually the ones with the most to hide, because they're trying to cover things up. They're trying to paint their own narrative. They're trying to get ahead of things. So is it that the reason law enforcement hasn't announced anything publicly or even to Jeff about that is because they're waiting for people to start talking? They're waiting for people to slip up. They're waiting for information to come out. Another thing that just makes me feel like this is not or could not have been self-inflicted is that as of November 4th, very recently, the FBI has joined this investigation. Now, they had announced earlier in October that they were going to be using the GBI and that they were going to be using resources of the FBI, but they didn't officially join this investigation until November 4th. Why join if it's believed to be self-inflicted? Why would the FBI join if it is thought to even have a possibility of being self-inflicted? And them joining happened right before this interview with Amanda. So I hardly think that they joined and then they fell off and then they came to this resolution. Like, it just doesn't make sense. And when they made this announcement on the 4th, I'm going to read to you what the piece of information said. It says, no arrests have been made and the sheriff's office has not listed any official suspects or revealed any breakthroughs in its investigation, which was being conducted jointly with the GBI. The FBI also joined the case last week, which was November 4th was the date they joined, after it appears to have been stalled, meaning that that's the reason that FBI joined on the 4th. Because they had no leads, they didn't have any suspects, they didn't have enough evidence, so they were at a standstill. So they needed the FBI to join at this point. If you're at a standstill, how are you at a standstill if you're believing that it could have been done by Debbie herself? It doesn't tie together, guys. Make it make sense. It does not make sense. And they said that the FBI is joining us to see if there's any way that they can assist us. That to me implies that they are still very much trying to figure out what happened here, to problem solve and to figure out what happened to Debbie. It hardly sounds like somebody who believes that this was self-inflicted, no less confirming that to a family member. Maybe I'm wrong, let me know in the comments, but that I've never seen anything like that, ever. Now, at the top of this video, I mentioned that I spoke with law enforcement this week. Basically, before I came on here to make this video, and as I was thinking about the interview I did with Jeff, again, there was a lot of information in that. I was like, you know what? I know it's not going to be released publicly, but maybe there are antidotes within that interview that will, work as a puzzle piece for the police, to where it will pose a question, it'll, show an inconsistency, it'll be like, oh, wait, we got to pause here. And so I contacted them to say, and I said when I called, I was like, look, I know this sounds crazy and I'm probably the last person in the world you want to hear from, but I'm a YouTuber. I did an interview with Jeffrey. It's about 2 hours long. He relayed a lot of information about the dynamics within the family, about certain things in Debbie's past, about family histories. And I don't know if it means anything, but I wanted to call you guys to see if you are still investigating, if you would want me to send you over that footage. But if not, no worries, let me know. Now, at first the person said, I don't know if that would be helpful. I think we're okay, but let me take down your information in case we do need it. And I said, okay, sure, no problem. Thinking, okay, maybe it is a closed investigation. I don't know. And then he asked what was some of the stuff that was discussed. And I told him. And there were certain things that I had mentioned. And his tone shifted right away to where he's like, wait, what? That? Okay, can you send us the video? Then he all of a sudden wanted it. And I had said, it's too big of a file. Obviously, I can't send it through email. I can send it through Dropbox, Google Drive, like whatever. We talked through it. So I thought that was interesting too, because again, I'm sure they want to collect all tips, all leads, all evidence, whatever, and make sense of whatever the outcome ends up being. But the fact that they were kind of dismissive, but then were very eager and, oh, no, please send that, once again just makes me take pause and say, so is this still open? Are they still wondering who could have done this to Debbie, like they originally said in the press conference? Because I hardly think, again, if they believed it was self-inflicted, that they would still want to receive more information. Maybe, I don't know. So anyways, I know that this was, way more casual than we usually do, and I kind of just wanted to talk through everything with you because these have been the updates. A lot of you guys have been asking what's going on. You saw the video, you heard, through the grapevine that there was an interview with Jeffrey that's not being aired. And so I just kind of wanted to address everything on here. I'm hopeful that answers do come out soon. I'm hopeful that law enforcement says what happened, says if they have any new leads, and dispels any rumors that are out there. There's just something still pulling at me, and tell me what you guys think in the comments. I just can't seem to believe that this was intentional. There's too many inconsistencies. Not only too many inconsistencies with stories and versions of events, but too many inconsistencies with the manner of death, the crime scene itself, the circumstances in which there was no note, the smash phone, all these things, to where it's like, this would have to be the most bizarre case of one taking their own life, especially because with all of that craziness, you have the huge layer on top of law enforcement point blank saying homicide, targeted, personal, somebody close to her. So with all of that information, it just is really hard for me to funnel it down to say, oh, I think it could be self-inflicted. And maybe it was. And again, we'll learn that. I mean, there's a lot that has gone awry based on that press conference that could have easily been reined in at any time had they ever started to think that it was going to, lead in that direction. So I don't know. We'll see. It's going to be interesting to see where it goes from here, guys, to see if more interviews come out. Maybe Jeffrey will change his mind and he'll want that interview put out. But I want to know what your thoughts are. Do you think that this was intentional by somebody close to Debbie or even somebody random? Do you think that this was murder? Or do you think that this was self-inflicted? And even if you're not sure, put the percentages in the comments below. I'm curious, are you 30% one way, 70% another? And like I said in the very beginning on my very first video about this case, and I'm still standing by it today, if it does prove to be murder and it proves to be somebody close to Debbie or because of somebody close to Debbie, I still don't believe that Amanda was directly involved. maybe indirectly, or maybe a catalyst, or maybe a reason, I don't know. But based on her emotion, based on the relationship as far as being a female and a family member and the crime scene and the manner of death and all these things, I feel like somebody to do all of those things based on, we've seen parental and children, murders before and things like that, and you hardly ever get something this hands-on and personal, especially by a female. So if that were proven to be the case, I would be floored, and I'd be like, oh my gosh, this is like, a sociopath we're dealing with. I really don't think that's the case. Could she indirectly be involved, or could this have been something taken out on Debbie because of something from Amanda's past? Perhaps, maybe. Who knows? I just don't, there's something pulling at me that doesn't make me feel like she's directly involved in the crime, the murder, if it is a murder itself. So let me know what you think about that too, in addition to if you are, weighing closer to self-inflicted or murder in the comments below. I want to know what your thoughts are on that, because we do know there have been inconsistencies and, conflicting statements made, but could that be explained away from grief, from nerves, from being distraught? Could that be explained because maybe she's involved in a piece of the cover-up or something like that rather than the crime itself? I feel like there could be a lot of different options here. So just trying to be neutral here, guys, and have a conversation with you. Again, I know it was more casual than usual, but just kind of want to talk through it with you. So let me know what you think in the comments below. I will keep you updated as soon as we know more. If we hear anything from law enforcement, if Jeffrey does reach out and say, I do want that interview aired now, I changed my mind, whatever information we hear, I'll let you know. But let me know what you think, and don't forget, subscribe if you haven't done so already so that you'll get notified as soon as I do post that update. All right, guys, thanks again for tuning in today, and until the next one, stay safe.